and then I kind of figured out it's not my cup of tea job. And then 2006, I started my own tech company, which is called Pronto Infotech. We mostly started working with customized IT solutions, but now we focus heavily on two products, which are for BFSI sector. We have offices in Mumbai, London, and Dubai of that company. So that's my bread and butter. That has about 60 people right now working under me. Now I am not that much active there, in the sense I do very high sales and marketing stuff there. In 2009, we started with our ventures. We formed the company of thinking to invest into early stage startups, because Mumbai Angels and IN was coming into picture at that point of time. So me and my co-founder have a portfolio about more than 60 companies in personal capacity, because we experimented with a lot of early stage investments. And Harshad, who is a good friend of mine, both of us started our ventures in 09 to mostly invest into early stage companies on our own. But then we thought in 2011-12, let's invite some of our friends also and build a network around it. And that's how the whole network concept came into picture. We call ourselves the only curated fundraising platform in the country. That means we curate startups. You can't reach our investors directly. Our portfolio right now is about 56 investments in 41 startups, close to about $25 million. We have had great exits, about 9 exits till now, ranging from IRR 30 to 90%. So we look at startups which are not very early. That means you should be out in the market. You should have some customer traction and some revenue in place. We don't do seed, because the minimum which we raise to our platform is 1 CR. That's it. And we are sector agnostic. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Next, coming to Bhavesh sir, a short highlight about your journey as a venture capitalist, how you started.
So, first of all, thank you so much, Pranam, for inviting me here. Delighted to be among some of the brilliant names from the industry, especially Abhijit. I know him for almost like a decade now. Since we have been in the industry, we've been closely working. I'm very new in this industry when it comes to investments, right? So we have done a couple of investments. These are all personal investments, if I have to say that. But having said that, I've spent 20 close years working with, I would say, micro businesses now known as startups. And during that journey, that's where the mentoring journey started almost a decade ago. While I was also representing a magazine called Entrepreneur India Magazine, which I launched in the country as a general manager there. And my forte has been primarily mentoring, because that's what I, in fact, firmly believe that, though you can put money into the business, but I think what is important is to actually guide, those young entrepreneurs, those new ideas, in terms of how you could be able to help them take it to the next level as well, right? So I've played some critical roles in advising few startups, in helping them raise funds as well, due to my previous venture as well. What now we are doing is we are actually putting together a micro VC fund for early stage startups which are either founded or co-founded by women entrepreneurs. So the name is called Millennium Divas. Unfortunately, COVID has been a barrier for us also from an entry perspective. But we have done some good work in encouraging and nurturing more women entrepreneurship. What we have also done over the past 6 months is we have tied up with the government of Gujarat in putting together a roadmap for encouraging and nurturing more entrepreneurs, primarily where I am closely associated. So we signed an MOU in the month of November with them, and we are doing some significant work in terms of how we could be able to leverage their strategies and bring in more resources from our end to build together something more robust and helping them build value within the state as well. So that's been the journey so far.
Thank you so much for your introduction as well, sir. Coming to you, Rohit sir, how did you start your journey as a VC particularly?
I've actually been on the other side first. So I have had my own two different entrepreneurial ventures, both of which I exited. I actually did not sort of set off to become a VC, very honestly. But I was started doing some angel investing on the side. That somehow, one thing leading to other graduated me to managing a multi-family office corpus. And then, and then now my new entrepreneurial venture is in the financial services space. So it's a VC fund. So I still consider myself as an entrepreneur at heart. I don't consider myself as a VC or anything. It's just that my company works in the financial services space. Having said that, as entrepreneurs have their own focus, our fund has a very clearly defined focus. So we are a seed to Series A fund, which means we prefer entering early on in the company's journey and sort of keep backing them up for at least 2 or 3 rounds more. And we have two broad themes that we focus on when it comes to investment. One is financial inclusion at large. So companies that are either, let's say, creating new financial products which don't exist yet, or increasing access to existing financial products. So these are the two types of subset under financial inclusion. And the other theme that we broadly focus on is B2B tech adoption. So therein we are working with deep tech companies or companies that are basically using or sort of solving for an ops heavy function by leveraging technology again. So basically sort of adoption of technology for businesses and adoption of financial services for the masses. So these are the two themes that we largely focus on. As I said, we are a seed to Series A fund. And yeah, I think happy to take on any questions later on during the session. But before we actually begin, thanks not just to the host, but also to the audience. It's a Sunday evening. It's a difficult time to sort of commit to work. So yeah, thanks to all the attendees as well to be present.
Thank you so much, Rohit sir, also for your opening remarks. And yes, thank you to all of the participants also who have joined. And it has been a little difficult in terms of the early stage investments also at this point of time, and most of our audience in the fundraising masterclass that we are doing are from the first time founders. Particularly 60% of them are first time founders here. So my question, the next question I'll start with Abhijit sir, that in terms of the pre-fundraising activities, according to you, what is your advice to the startup founders to be prepared before approaching the potential investors? Like your ideology to consider the startup as investment ready.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, you don't need to call me sir all the time. You can just call me by name. Makes me look too old. I know I am old, but it's okay. No. So, generally, what we look at is quite a lot. Focus is on team. So, team gets a lot of preference whenever we are considering startups for fundraising. I would say about 80% weightage goes on team, more than 80% sometimes. Because if we are able to identify founders who are going to stick to the cause or the problem statement which they're solving for the next 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, that's what, as an investor or the platform gives a confidence that, okay, then we should go ahead and maybe help these startups raise fund. Because the business plan, the market scenario, all these keep changing. You don't have control over that. But yeah, the founders, if you are, they are dedicated enough, they are vigilant, they are hardworking, down to earth guys, they figure out, pivot well. Pivoting is very important. If you can't pivot, you can't survive. You can't run a business without pivoting. If you say that your first idea is going to become $1 billion, it has never happened and it will never happen. You have to pivot and you have to keep pivoting, and that depends on founders. So our shortlisting criteria also, if you see all the mails which go to founders have 5-6 factors, which is one is founders profile, second is your problem statement, third is your USP, fourth is your how much money you are raising, valuation and things like that. But 80-85% focus is on founders. Yeah. Thanks.
All right. So Bhavesh sir, next to you, the same question in terms of the pre-fundraising activities. Would you like to, share some views about that?
Yeah, so I think I would obviously agree with Abhijit. Team plays a lot of a major role, because as he rightly said, markets can move, right? So today, if you see the situation, COVID, right? No one was prepared. But have you already been able to identify now how am I going to move forward in this direction, right? So in that sense, the team plays a huge role. I think the agility of the team also is very important, because if you are not coachable, if you are not, if you are a hard-headed founder, I think what happens is you are not able to get the market voice, in that. So that's the second perspective. The third is, the three aspects: the short-term goal, the medium-term objectives, and the long-term vision. I think if you're able to put that together and understand, that markets can be volatile at any point of time, but are you able to also visualize where you will move? Okay, if this happens, right? So that also helps you to build some leadership, capabilities and skills within yourself, and that also helps you to put it with the team as well. So these are some of the points that are very, very important. One last thing is knowing, when to raise funds, and how are you going to utilize this. Are all, the whole ball game that boils down. Most important is, look, you are going to raise funds and you are looking at borrowing money from the market, right? Equity is very expensive, right? So you need to be very careful in terms of what you're promising to the investors, okay? Because what happens is, after 3 months when you sit down, or after a month, month and a half, 2 months when you sit down, you should be able to drive communication, okay? And, make sense. Otherwise, what happens is you've already fallen flat on your face. And that is where, your next money coming in, or your next strategy might not be beneficial for you.
All right. Thank you, sir. Rohit sir, would you like to add anything in terms of this, in terms of the pre-fundraising activities, what you as a VC fund look for in a startup? So you mute, I think.
Sorry, both Bhavish and Abhijit have made fantastic points. So I'd like to just sort of add more from an institutional investor's perspective, and given the current context, given that the market is basically, it's also a good time to sort of clean up your house, and just ensure that all your paperwork is in place. Because as a founder, when you are beginning early stage, a lot of things are working on trust. You have customers who you are doing business with. You have contracts which may or may not have expired, or there was just a contract shared but not properly executed. But then you began business any which ways, right? So a lot of these sort of hygiene check, both in terms of your financials, your statutory compliances, your legal paperwork and everything. I believe it's a good time to sort of catch up on those in case anybody's been left behind. Again, I'm saying this only comes after, of course, once you have the team in place, the correct focus in place, and the agility in place. I'm just saying, because all good points were sort of already made, I thought of giving one which is more contextually relevant now.
Thank you so much. Satish sir, would you like to add anything to this question?
Yeah, I think so. I think Abhijit and I think Rohit and Bhavesh have already kind of stated all the key points. The only thing is, when we are kind of reviewing startups or investments now, I think the metrics and the evaluation of metrics will get a lot more deeper now, because one thing it is to look at the projections, it is to look at the current numbers. But other thing is that also that whatever traction a startup is currently achieving, has it thought through different scenarios. Will the growth and will the traction continue to sustain over a period of time? So those are the things that we also now look at very carefully, because I think because of this current medical context, I think all the investors have also become a lot more cautious. They need to understand that how resistant and how risk buffered a startup is to multiple scenarios. And we have to see that whether then startup can pivot in various scenarios, and how can they continue to grow and sustain their business over a longer period of time. So I think that thing becomes a lot more serious now compared to previous times. When it was slightly more easier for investors to make a decision. Now it will become maybe a lot more time consuming and more deeper process as compared to last time. That's all.
Thank you so much for all of your insights, actually. And in terms of the pre-fundraising activities, it is the most complex. Is the most complex answer for any first-time startups to identify that are we actually fund ready or no, investment ready or no. That is the main aspect that you even the startups should consider. I completely agree with all of your points. So coming to my next question in terms of approaching investors, Bhavesh sir, I'll start with you. In terms of approaching a potential investor, it is always a tricky and a tiresome process. So could you highlight, a best way or the most possible, you can say, building a relationship with your potential investor, some highlights on that?
So, there is no specific, trick or, or a model to look at, how are you going to approach an investor, right? The point is that you need to be, first of all, ready and be able to understand why am I raising this fund in the first place, right? And I always say that when you're looking at raising funds, it should be for the growth and not to, build a product or, start a business. Okay, so that's one common sense that you need to. Second thing is investors are not looking at the market dynamics only, right? So they understand the market. They know, where the market will move maybe in the next 5-10 years or maybe 2-3 years as well, right? What they are looking at is how are you going to be able to drive this particular business in the first place, right? Because ultimately the investor is going to, maybe write a check, right? But are you going to be able to utilize that? So that's one area. The second aspect is understanding that it's a relationship. It has to be looked from a very different perspective. You can't keep chasing investors, over LinkedIn or, keep messaging them. If you would have met them, at a particular event or maybe on a webinar or wherever, right? You can't keep sending them emails. You need to understand the psychology and the mindset of the investor and the sectors which they might be looking at. Okay, so maybe a good portfolio check, makes a good start too, right? Second thing is you need to also be able to understand what else he or she is bringing on board, okay, when it comes to engaging with an investor. So look at the current scenario. What has happened is most of the investors are now saying, look, we might not want to do, more deals the way we were doing, right? We would want to invest significant time and energy in actually with our own portfolios. Okay, can we add more value rather than just writing a check, right? So you will need to understand what kind of investor are you looking at. Are you looking at a plain vanilla, professional who comes in and says, hey, look, I don't mind. This is the money. You move forward. You tell me what's happening. That's it, right? Then there is another set of investors who will say, okay, look, I'm happy to help you. Can I open up a lot of doors, maybe corporate engagements, maybe, referrals through a lot of my network and connects, apart from only writing checks, right? So you will have to do a background bit of an homework. And before you even do that, you need to understand what kind of investors are you looking for in the first place, right? So what is he or she going to bring more rather than just writing a check? Also, a lot of times what happens is don't expect, the investor to become your mentor. I think this is something that you need to be very cautious about. It's a very thin line, right? So, you need to be sure that, you're not looking for mentoring and guidance. I think he or she might not be having that kind of a time or a bandwidth to give you that. Yeah, a good strategic advice makes sense, but, getting him or her to mentor or to do sales for you is a strict no-no. Okay. So that's my point.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. Coming to you, Goel sir. In terms of approaching the investors, what is your ideology about, establishing the rapport with a VC particularly? Again, you mute, sir, I think.
No. I was just saying, before I begin, just please call me Rohit. No need to address as sir or by the second name. First names work fine. One thing one needs to understand, and this is very much for first time, for companies that are raising money for the first time, one needs to understand and like sort of get it ingrained that having raised money from an investor is not a sign of success. Okay, it basically, and it is not, does not mean that you've achieved something or you've reached a certain place to be complacent. In fact, having raised money, external money, is actually brings on more pressure to perform, and you have to start becoming more and more serious about your business. So like even Bhavesh mentioned, don't think that an investor would come help you with sales, help you with 10 other things. He'll also become your mentor. It's a two-way street, right? So you can't, like as a first-time fundraiser, you can't expect like the investor to do all the work. There's also a lot of significant amount of work that you also have to do. So a lot of times, a lot of companies feel, oh, if only I get my first round of funding, I'll be through or I'll be done, or this company succeeded. But that's never the case. So usually, and this has been so in my experience. So the moment even the first check comes into the company, the amount of effort that the company or the founders are expected to put in the company usually goes up from whatever they were doing before. So if you are looking at, having raised fund as a status symbol or as a sign of success, trust me, it isn't so. So you are just going to be looked at to do work harder or to work smarter, so on and so forth. So that's one very important perspective one needs to consider even before. So as a company, are you ready for that? And at times, and I've seen a couple of companies do that. So one needs to understand that not all businesses are invested in businesses. You could be doing a business at a certain scale, probably also making some profit. But just because you seek an external validation, you go out there, you raise money. The moment you raise money, the growth expectations change drastically. And that is something that probably you were not prepared for before. And hence, there are this huge different dynamics that comes in. So just first ask yourself, do you really need to raise more money? Number one. Number two, if you need to raise money, you might find an investor out there. But are you, or by you, I mean the founding team at large, if it is multiple founders. So are you ready to actually take on that responsibility? Because it's not like, and no investor here is writing checks and like this, forgetting about it, right? Investors are making investments, are not writing grants. So one needs to be very much sort of aware of that piece, is what I believe. And I'll sort of end it there.
Thank you so much. Coming to you, Satish sir, how do you think will be, the best way to approach a potential investor that, to build a relationship with a potential investor? So what are your key points on that?
So I think Rohit and Bhavesh have already kind of mentioned a lot of critical points out here. The only thing which I might want to add from my end is, not all investors invest in all kind of startups, right?
Right.
So it always helps to kind of do your homework before you approach any investor, because an investor may have an affinity towards a particular domain. He may have a particular style of apprehending or comprehending information that you give it to him. He may invest in a particular stage. So there could be investors who are looking at early stage. There could be investors who are more interested in Series A. So you have to do your homework well. And I think in today's age, that is something which is not difficult. You can go on any of the platforms, you have LinkedIn, you have Crunchbase. It always helps if you know the investor, if you understand his thesis before you approach him. It also helps if you maybe want to talk to a few of his investee companies to understand what is his temperament all about. What does he like? What excites him into a certain tech? And then accordingly, if you can customize your tech, as per the investor, so that because certain investors may be interested in numbers, certain investors may be interested in understanding how the market will grow over a number of years. They may not look at numbers that closely. So that's what I'm saying. Every investor, just like every human being, has a different way of analyzing deals. And it always helps if you can do your homework very well before you approach that guy, because one single investment tech or one single investment approach will not work with all the investors, as such. So that's my contribution out there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Lastly, Abhijit sir, would you like to add something on this in terms of approaching the investors, particularly
Yeah.
Ventures module. If you can
So, yeah, thanks. I would pick one point of Rohit. Most of the points are already covered, but one point of Rohit, and then I'll add quickly my bit on that. See, investors are not your friends. They are never your friends. They have invested money in any company, so they want the money back. It's hard-earned money for any person, right? So, if you are thinking that an investor is doing a charity by investing in me, or he can be a mentor, as Bhavesh said, he can be an investor also, he can be a business, business person for me also. That's not true. As an investor, if I invest 100 rupees in you, even if I have to get 20% IRR, that means I have to put 200 rupees in 4 years, which is a tough target. It's not an easy target. Doubling money in 4 years is not easy. So that's the minimum IRR which most of the investors look for, 20%. So it's, as Rohit said, as everyone has been saying, that that journey becomes much tougher once you raise funds, because the investors want the money back. They've not given you money to put in FD and get 6% and 8% return out of them. That I
Bhavish,
can do.
just a correction.
Yeah.
Sorry, Bhavish, for interrupting. For us, it's 30%, by the way. 20 is too low.
I gave a very optimistic scenario of 20% IRR, which is too low. Still 4 years. If you go 30, then it becomes 3 years. You have to double the money. If you go 40%, 50%, then So I'm saying that investors have to multiply their money. They have not put the money in you because they want to do 6%, 8%. So as Rohit mentioned, as Bhavesh, it's a very much tougher journey. So don't think somebody has raised funds so their lives have become easier. They are now, buying Mercedes, and you don't even get salaries till the time you raise maybe $1 million. You get peanuts in even in salaries. Second point, I think, which I wanted to add, is a lot of entrepreneurs in India don't work on business plan, financial model, storytelling, investor background, which all have pointed out. Entrepreneurs in India don't want to do work. First, if you want to raise funds, do some hard work from your end also, right? Get a nice PPT done, get a nice financial model done, learn storytelling, practice 100 times before you even approach an investor. I have seen so many entrepreneurs, mature entrepreneurs who are doing good business, have started fundraising, and you ask them, after 3 years, what your salary would be, what would be the salary of the founders? They will say, I will come back to the Excel and get back to you. Boss, you should be, you should have kind of, mugged these things. You have to vomit these things, right? So this is heavily missing in Indian founders. Outside of developed countries, maybe Israel or US founders, you will see they are all so kind of practiced. When they talk to investors, they will show, boss, then my money is going to become 100x the next day. So that's a major difference which entrepreneurs have to work on here, especially in India.
All right. So that's actually a very good advice. And Rohit, I'll address you by the first name because I think it is getting very awkward to you, me mentioning sir again and again. So Rohit, coming to you, starting the question series with you. In terms of the exit strategy that you mentioned, could you highlight a little bit more about the the VC side of the table in terms of how do you investors identify good opportunities? Like, the wow factor. What is it that the startup should have in terms of getting funded? Like the wow factor. What is your take on that?
So okay, I'll tell you about, this is a very, very sort of broad question. I could probably speak on it for 2 days, but I'll sort of keep it a bit abstract and I'll try summing it up into 4 major pieces. The first is we looked at again in sort of increasing order of priority. First is what we look at as a broader contextual fit. So what the startup is doing should be in alignment with what's happening in a broader ecosystem. Like, for example, if we are now getting a company which is now trying to, let's say, increase fuel efficiency for internal combustion engine, that industry at large is sort of dying. So whether it's broadly aligned with the larger context, then the slightly more weightage probably I would give to sectorial alignment in terms of what sector or space that the company is in, how much transformation is that going through, which also sort of means, is the space big enough as well from a market sizing perspective. The third is the actual business model. So as a policy, we do not sort of blindly fund cash burn business models wherein we say, oh, we'll acquire customers, figure out how to monetize them later. So that's something that we as a fund do not do. So we are okay with loss-making companies, but as long as the unit economic level clarity is present, or as long as there is a clear sort of go-to-market strategy in place. So we would look at that. And then last, but of course, the most important for us is the team. And that, so to say, is the wow factor. So if it's a great team or a great founder or a group of founders that are heading a particular value proposition, because again, as Abhijit also mentioned in the beginning, right, your business model can sort of pivot, your sector can pivot, your monetization strategies can change, your customers can change. The only thing that does not change is the founders, right? So that, I think, so is the most crucial aspect.
Thank you so much on that. Satish sir, coming to you next about, what can be the wow factors in terms of your lookout in terms of the potential investments that you do?
So I think, continuing from where Rohit left, I think for me, we also obviously we look at the team, we look at the traction, and I think one factor which I personally feel is what could be the secret sauce that a startup may have. And now when I say about secret sauce, it could be anything. It could be maybe the team. It could be the kind of network that a team has that can bring an unfair advantage to the business that they're doing. It could be a specific process that a team is doing, which makes them different and give them a lead over potential competitors for at least a period of 6 to 9 months down the line. It could be a certain IP or a certain unique innovation or certain disruptive innovation that they think that they can launch in the market, which can move the market to their favor. So I think those are the factors that we also look out for, as to what kind of traction they already have built, how they have built the traction, and how will they be able to sustain that growth using their secret sauce or using that unique, outstanding capability that they may have, which may give them a certain lead for a period of next few months over any other competitor who may want to catch up with them. So that's one factor that we also look into.
Thank you so much for your inputs. Abhijit sir, would you like to add something on this in terms of the wow factor that you use for the curation, like the curated startups that you mentioned? So what can be the wow factor for them? I think you're muted.
Sorry, Satish and Rohit have already covered quite a few points. As I said, major focus is always on team, but in the team, when you meet the founder, that is the first impression, which is maybe the last impression, in front of investors. So when we meet founders, how you present yourself, not in sense of just your business, also how you are, presenting your own personality, how confident you are, how well prepared you are, how, I would say, accepting you are. That means, you don't have to be rude in front of investors. I know you guys, entrepreneurs know their business, but then you can't be rude in front of investors. A lot of entrepreneurs do that mistake. That, okay, I know my business well, so I will just, on the face reject the suggestions which investors are giving. That is not right. You do whatever you want to do at the backstage. That nobody is going to come and regulate you every day, right? But then these are the humility, down to earth, listening to advices. Finally, at the end, you have to impress investors. Personal level, professional level, monetary level, doesn't matter. You talk about wine or you talk about your business, doesn't matter. If the investor is interested, he'll put the money, he or she'll put the money. It's very simple. At the end, they are also betting huge, right? Because early stage startups, you never know what will happen. So except the very professional advices you got, this is very unprofessional. Impress the investor. That's the only motto you should have.
Thank you on that. That is actually one of the most important points, because rather than the impression, it is like a long-term relationship that the investors are going to work with you. So that is where the key aspect again takes in place. Bhavesh sir, would you like to add something on this in terms of the wow factor that the potential investors look into?
Let me give you a very classic example of one of the investments that we did. I would say last year. This was a Pune-based startup. Okay, now what we saw, there were three things that we saw. One was the passion and the fire. Okay, that the startup had. I mean, he knew what he was talking. Okay, and this was not more of a kind of a fairy tale. He had done his homework so really well that he understood where he stands, what are his market, what is the competition not doing. Because we all talk about what is the competition doing, but we rarely come to know what is the competitor not doing and why they are doing it, and why competition is not doing it. So that understanding of why they are doing it is also very important, that's one area. The third biggest area that we saw was the entrepreneur came from a pedigree of the services that they are providing, right? So he had his generations, 2 generations actually doing the same thing. And that brings in a lot of confidence that, look, the guy knows because it's been there for almost like 2 decades or 3 decades that they have been doing within the family. And also the understanding of why it is to be done in the similar fashion and what are the value that they are adding. So that was the third area. The most fourth critical area was that we could see a lot of opportunities in upselling and creating multiple product domains. So what happened was the service that they are providing became more of a vehicle to launch multiple product lines. And today what we're also doing is we are also helping him to create merchandising areas where they could be able to scale business. So understand that do you see an opportunity? Okay, now again there's a thin line between attitude and arrogance, right? As Abhijit said, that you need to you know a lot of things, but you need to also understand that, look, you are here to raise funds, you're not here to beg money, right? So that does not give you a right to even negate some time, right? So that's the third area that is very, very critical. I think what is important is be really empathetic, be grounded to what you're doing, and take things as they come, even if the investor is trying to tell you something, okay? Because it is his or her perspective. So please understand, you have your own perspectives, and perspectives might you might agree to disagree a lot of times, right? The way you do within your teams. So that is very important, when you're looking at investments. As my panelist said that when you're looking for asking money from the market, you're actually taking up a huge risk to say that, look, I have to give this money back also, right? At some point of time. No longer the valuation game, is going to play. Okay. One more thing that is that if you don't know, please agree to it that you don't know. It's always good, right? And seek for help and advice. I think there's nothing harm in learning from others. I think it will obviously add a lot of value to what you are doing, right? So for example, I always say that take professional help and advice. Okay, if you really are serious about building your business and you're looking for fundraise, go out in the market, spend some money, and get your deck decked up. Okay, there are a lot of people who could give you a lot of value benefits at a better cost and a price, right? So go out, get your deck cleaned up, make it more beautiful, keep it sweet and simple. Don't write too many stories, right? Your story should be here and not on the PPTs, right? You should be able to talk, even when you have woken up at 2 o'clock in the midnight, saying that, look, this is what I do. So that brings in a lot of conviction that look, this guy knows everything. He might have done a ratta of whatever he wants to, or he or she wants to, right? But he talks and he understands where he comes from. So that's my take on this.
All right. Thank you so much for all of your insights in terms of the wow factor, what the startups should be ready with particularly. So this is actually a very different question altogether in the lineup that I had decided first. So Satish sir, I'd like to start it with you. What are the 3 main questions that you ask your startups before the investment takes place? So what are the 3 questions that they should be prepared with answering? So for all of you, this goes into the 3 main questions that you ask in terms of the potential opportunities that are put forward. So starting with you, Satish sir.
So I think for me, obviously the first three questions are the first one is about the team. What is the team? What is the kind of combined execution capability that the team has? Either they already have delivered or they have brought on board because of their previous experience. Right. So that's the first important factor that I need to understand. As I think all of you will agree, the team has to come with a certain pedigree and experience because especially in early stage startups, the team still matters a lot. The second question I think which matters again is traction. What kind of traction they already have built. What kind of business have they created? What have they understood? What have been their challenges and how have they been able to overcome those challenges? Have they already pivoted once or twice? Have they already got into how they have got into early revenues? And where do they see that potential which is going to come going forward, right? And the third critical question for me could be, understanding what could be the risk that the business may face going forward, right? And especially considering those risks, how will they be able to mitigate those risks? So if a founder has thought through those points, so which means that they may have done their homework quite well. And I think this is something which is also reflected in the way they would have structured their financial numbers. Because even when you look at the projections, we may not stick with numbers as such, but what we look out is specifically with in terms of assumptions. How they have built a model. Have they been able to do a fair modeling of the business? Is there a sync between expenses and revenues? How are the both the things flowing 2 years or 1 year down the line? Because, for example, a lot of times what happens is, just to jack up the numbers, a lot of founders, while they will show an upsurge in revenues, they will not be able to expand on expenses to that extent. So I normally ask that, if you will be able to double your business, but your team is still same. You want to keep your team still to the same level. How will you do that? You will have to have more team members. You will have to have a more controlled and a more better managed, well thought through expense sheet also. So again, as I'm saying, how have the business or founders have been able to assume the journey 2 years down the line, and how well have they been able to model that journey is something which becomes critical.
Thank you so much. Abhijit sir, coming to you, the three main questions that you ask your startups before assessment.
So, we have a job of mostly not shortlisting startups. We kind of reject startups because we get about 500 to 600 mails every month. People who want to write to us and want to raise funds. So for us, it's more rejecting people rather than shortlisting. So I would getting into what Satish has covered, Rohit would covered, Bhavesh would covered. For me, the first impression, what the whole team is supposed to get is the three question is team. If even if it's a crowded sector and the team is strong, we might still look at it. But if it's a new product and the team is weak, we might reject the startup right there. So for us, that's the first and I would say the second shortlisting criteria. Then the rest comes into picture. But that's our weightage criteria is right now. Because when you have to reject so many, you would obviously bet with people the best horse in the race, right? So otherwise, how would you bet? You don't know how the race course is. You don't know how the mud is. You don't know how the crowd is. So the best bet you're gonna take is the horse or the person who is riding it. That's where the shortlisting criteria is. Thanks.
All right. Bhavesh sir, your inputs on the three important questions that we as an entrepreneur should be ready in terms of our fundraising activities.
So I would have actually loved to be in Abhijit's situation of rejecting so many. I am not in that space, so I would say thank you, or maybe I would say I am not yet so fortunate to be in that space. But see, I mean, one of the first criteria that we have, since we are at a very very early stage, right, is the founders should be women entrepreneurs. The founders and the co-founding team has to be. And when it says, it doesn't mean that 95% is with the guy and then the remaining 5% is with his wife, or maybe with the co-founder, just for the sake of the woman tag, right? Apart from that, what we also look at is why does he need so much of money, he or she? Right? Why do you need so much of money? Do you really understand that? And I think the third one is, as Abhijit said, team. Which goes without saying, right? Because you need to be the captain of the ship, and if you are not able to drive the ship, I don't think you will be able to ever succeed in life, right? So that's one. So and apart from that, markets can change. You can maneuver it very well. Even if the adverse situations are there, because you will obviously have a hand at help. But most important is asking yourself, why do I need so much of money? Do I know how much is too much? You need to also know that. So I've seen people coming and say, hey, look, I need $10 million, I need $5 million. I said, boss, who are you asking in the first place? Do you really understand where are you moving in that? Why do you need so much of money? So knowing that also is very important.
Thank you so much. Rohit, coming to you, the same question. What are your three important questions that you ask?
Important questions. Okay, I'm going to sort of keep it simple and direct. So first is, what is your business moat and how is it defensible? So which is to do more with the business model. Second would most likely be, let's say, what are the, how does each of the team members sort of justify the role that they are given? Or if somebody is not, for example, if you have a 2 tech founder team, nobody's taking care of sales. So is the team actually aware of what roles and responsibility each one of them have taken up, and what are the gaps thereof? So a couple of questions around that. It's usually never a single question. And lastly, I ask a question of my benefit, and how will you give me exit? So I think those are the 3 questions, beyond, of course, a lot of other good questions that were sort of mentioned by other panelists as well.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'd like to give you a short note in terms of all of the people present here, all the participants here. The chat box will be open. If you want to ask any questions to the panelists, please mention the person that you want to ask the question to, so that it is easy for me to direct it. And coming to the last segment also, even Abhijit sir and Bhave sir have mentioned this small aspect, which I would like to make a small announcement in those terms, that Millennium Divas and Bhave sir has humbly given us the opportunity to work with Millennium Divas for formation of our virtual CFO product. So that product basically is a hand-holding or an you can say a guide for all of these startups who are present here in terms of their incorporation, compliances, financial modeling, and the pitch deck building before you can approach the investors. Also to help out in terms of your fundraising activities to approach potential angel investors. So the email ID will be is in the link. So anybody who wants to approach can definitely mail it to us and get in touch. So lastly, okay, I have many questions in that also. Okay, first is from Dheeraj. So could you define how you evaluate team weightage on experience and education? So Abhijit sir, would you like to take this question, as your answer was team in those aspects? So Abhijit sir, can you hear me? Okay, I think he is a little bit disconnected in those terms. Okay, so anyway, Rohit sir, would you like to take this question in terms of how do you define on terms evaluating?
So Dheeraj, thanks for asking this question. One thing I also want to make clear, as in, I think I see this piece in a lot of questions on the chat box. See, VC investing or any an investor making a decision, it's not a mathematical model or so, right? So not that all parameters have a certain weightage, and all we could give is, okay, we consider it important, not so important, or very, very important, right? Things around that. So if it were all sort of set rules, this piece would have been automated. And by the way, there are people who are trying to automate, like similar to algorithmic trading, which is doing that on the listed market. There are people trying to sort of also create a fixed structure, but that isn't out yet. No. So, like I said, there are multifold. So it's as good as evaluating any other human being, right? For whatever purpose you are evaluating them for. So there is an emotional side to things, there's an intellectual side to things, there's a relationship piece to the engagement. So as to how would the relationship with the particular founder be, and hence I think Abhijit mentioned that you really need to impress the investor because they are then also looking at a good relationship going forward. And of course, like the basic hygiene check in terms of, very honestly, as far as I'm concerned, I see weightage on experience and education, and I feel I get asked this question a lot as well. So, what about serial founders versus first-time founders, and what about people who are not from IITs and IIMs, right? So I personally feel that as long like experience and like your institution grade are basically telling me that the founder isn't stupid. But beyond that, I don't think so. They have much more significance as far as our evaluation process is concerned. Like Abhijit mentioned, all institutional and like even us, we end up evaluating about 100 mandates every month or so. 99% of our time goes in saying no, right? So we are looking at, okay, whether there is enough common sense, whether the founder understands the domain or the space that they are working in, whether they have a fair enough understanding of it, so on and so forth. So as long as it's a well motivated, we call it disproportionately mission driven founder, we are happy in terms of the whole evaluation as far as the relationship or the engagement is concerned.
All right. Thank you so much. I have actually got a question for personal chat. Okay, so I'll direct it to Satish sir, because you had mentioned the terms in terms of the valuation of a company. So the question that I have been asked is how do you from the perspective of a founder, how do you value your company and how do you justify it to an investor?
Okay, so I think valuation, in my perspective, is both an art and a science, right? So science, when I say, because eventually, yes, there are numbers that we have to look into. There are very defined methodologies, which take into consideration your future revenues, your future EBITDA margins, right? So, for example, most commonly used method is a DCF method, which is the discount cash flow method of valuation that basically looks into your potential revenues 3 or 4 years down the line, and allocates a kind of a present value to your business, and then we evaluate it as per we kind of put a certain discounting factor to it. So that is one basic of arriving at a kind of a benchmark number. On top of it, for example, we at Viridian, we do our own qualitative analysis on those numbers. So we run the numbers through a battery of questions, depending on the context, depending on the sector, depending on the kind of entrepreneur. So we have a set of about 22 questions that we run the numbers through, giving each question a certain weightage, and that gives us a kind of a qualitative multiple to arrive at, and then we multiply that multiple to the arrive valuation to arrive at again at the benchmark number. But then, when I say that valuation is also an art, I think eventually valuation is something which will get decided on the table in a face-to-face manner, because no matter what number you put, what number you calculate, that is just a benchmark number, because valuation, I think at the end of the day, it becomes a relative question of how desperate you are to raise funds, and how excited an investor is to be part of your pie. Right, so it's always a negotiated deal which will happen on a case-to-case basis. There could be multiple factors around it, and I think nowadays there will be multiple models around it. For example, in early stage investments, we are seeing a trend of convertible instruments rather than valuation-based instruments. So which basically means that we do not even get stuck in valuation. We just invest into a startup, and the valuation is decided into later rounds. We invest into a startup through a convertible note. So I think a lot is changing. So there are every investor may have their own perspective around valuation, but these are the broad parameters. So just to conclude, you have methodologies to arrive at a certain benchmark numbers, but finally what happens is something which will be decided on a case-to-case basis and is a matter of personal negotiation between the investor and the founder.
Thank you so much. We're actually running a bit short of time because we've already exceeded an hour. So I'd like to thank all of you. Just to mention here even two of the questions that I have received from Rahul. Rahul says that for all the panelists, not a question, but an idea that sparked in terms of rejecting most of the applications. So,
sorry, I'm actually just typing an answer to Rahul on the chat for that. I'll actually speak it out for everybody's benefit. Rahul, that's a good question, but think of this like a matrimony services, right? So the algorithm will provide a lot of shortlisted candidates for you, but you have to select only one. In that case, we get to select a few, but still, again, most of your time would still go in saying no or to evaluating one, because for each investor has their own take or their own style. It's literally like getting. I actually give this example. It's not actually getting married, but it's like dating, especially with VCs, because our relationship comes with an expiry date which is well documented. So it's really to each his own. By the way, such services do exist that help you shortlist companies. But having said that, it's the same challenges. Most of our deal flow partners, as we call them, do that for us. And yet there is a very sort of high rejection rate after that.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, what Rohit has said is, there could not be any one standard definition of rejecting applications. For example, what Rohit may reject is something which I may like. So every investor have a very different way of looking at things. Otherwise all the investors would be running off the same deals. That doesn't happen, right? Every investor have their own pockets. Every investor have their own risk analysis. And we all take different risks in different startups. And coming from a startup perspective, I think a startup founder, as we know that an entrepreneur, has to find one fool to believe in him. So he may make a pitch to 50 investors, but finally the 51st investor may be the one fool who will believe in him and put money on him. So you never know. So it's an ongoing exercise, and you have to just keep trying and keep making yourself better with every pitch.
By the way, Airbnb raised money from the 57th investor.
Yeah.
The first one that they did.
Yeah.
The other 56 are slapping themselves on the face now, but to each his own.
Yeah.
Adding to that, Rahul, and for all of the participants also, we are actually, we've already built a product, like I told, with Bhaves's Millennium Divas, according with Bhaves itself, that we help those startups identify or make their terms of their pitch deck or financial models in those aspects, which will be taken into consideration, or which can be investor friendly in those perspectives. We also help out startups into identifying the potential investors, because like Satish sir likely said, there are sector agnostic venture capitalists or angel investors, but there are also those kind of angel investors who might invest in your startup. So you need to identify the exact investor as well. So considering that, anybody or Rahul, if you want to reach to us, you can write an email to us. I have already mentioned in the website as well, and even Rohit sir has already mentioned their website in the mail also. And for the concluding, when this session gets over, even all of the website links for your funds will be available in the mail itself, in the thank you mail itself. So I take this time to thank you, all of you, to actually joining and taking this time out for all four of you as well, and as well as for all of the participants who had joined in terms of being it a Sunday evening and a very relaxed afternoon to actually join in. So I'd like to thank all of you to be here, and it was nice actually. I would be glad to host you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All the best.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks
Take care.
everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.